If we neglect this part in a drawing process, it can result in drawings that look scattered, inconsistent, perhaps as if 2 or 3 or 4 different people had a hand in drawing it. Or we might just end up leaving our drawings half finished a lot of the time. Do any of these issues sound like your drawings? And if we neglect this, we never develop a really important and enjoyable part of drawing. And it really is more important, has more impact than it's going to sound when I tell you. So please listen to all the consequences of neglecting this part of the drawing process. What we so often neglect or think isn't important to the drawing process is planning how long we think a given drawing is going to take us to do, or how long we're going to spend on it, what our timeline is from start to finish. Instead, we just start and think, well, I'll finish when I finish. It's not the actual time frame which matters. I can have a scene of the most ornate part of the Musée du Louvre and I can plan to draw it in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, 6 hours. It's not about how long, per se, we draw for. But what I draw, how I draw it, depends on the time frame that I have. If I'm going to do a 5-minute drawing of the Musée du Louvre, then it's going to be a very loose style that really just grabs a few of the key visual elements of it. Whereas if I'm planning to do a 6-hour drawing, I'm allowing myself time to capture much more detail in my drawing, for much more precision in my line work. In other words, what I draw and how I draw it is very dependent on the expectation of time spent on the drawing that I have when I start it. You see, if I just think, oh, well, this looks like a fairly complicated scene, it'll probably take me longer to do in some sort of vague way, that's letting the subject take control over my drawing process, over my drawing session, because I'm letting the subject take control over my time. And that's almost certain to result in a fairly meandering drawing session, where I may or may not get to the end result, a finished drawing that I was hoping for. But when I establish the time frame in my head before I start, I'm actually taking control and I'm determining a lot of factors that are going to be important in how I draw whatever subject is before me. I'm not just establishing how long I'll be drawing for. I'm establishing how comprehensively I can actually observe my subject. I'm deciding how gestural my lines will be. I'm deciding the extent of the detail that I'll be able to capture. It will certainly determine the speed of my line work. I often hear a comment that people would like to develop a looser, more gestural style, that they feel their lines look wooden and stiff. If we give ourselves unlimited time, as long as it takes, for any drawing we have, that's not going to encourage us to push ourselves into faster, more gestural line work. Saying to ourselves before we start drawing, I have to craft my drawing process for this drawing to a 20-minute finished result, or a 30-minute or an hour. It doesn't matter how long the time session is, it's having one that's important to the drawing process. Because what I want to do in establishing a time for my drawing is to establish a tempo, a rhythm, a pace. And it's this consistent tempo which will drive a consistency in my line work, in my observation, in the amount of detail that I use and where I use it. It becomes the unifying factor that pulls all other components of my drawing together into a consistency that makes it look as if the one person has drawn it all. Because the time limit becomes a filter that all my decisions are made through. If you like, if I complete my drawing through the same stylistic pace, I will get a consistency that so many artists are still trying to achieve and aren't sure how to do it. It comes from knowing at the start, from the first line, the pace, the tempo, the rhythm I need to keep up for the whole drawing to complete it within a certain time that provides this. I keep that same tempo throughout my whole drawing, giving me the baseline for all the decisions that I need to make. giving me a baseline for all the decisions that I will need to make from the first line to the last line. And can I say this is not the same as simply dividing up all of our area into equal chunks for the time that we have. I consistently, regardless of how much time I'm taking, take 50% of my time to draw 25% of my drawing, because I know that the rhythm I have when I draw is that for a given period of time, my drawing pace picks up. And knowing this and having been able to work this out, I'm able to now use this in my tempo to have confidence that I don't need to rush and to have greater clarity into the actual line work process in the second half of the time for my drawing compared to the first half. And I think one of the main reasons so many drawings end up half finished, or unfinished at least, is that there was no intention with the time frame when they were started. And so there was no sense of drive, no sense of pushing, no sense of adapting the drawing process towards that end point. So it becomes very easy to start to meander, to get lost in a little section of it and finishing up developing something that looks inconsistent with another part that was done with a different mindset, with a different underlying tempo. And it's almost like we're trying to complete 2 or 3 drawings on the same page, and then by the time we go off and have lunch or do something else and come back, we've really lost interest in it because we've lost that rhythm, we've lost that tempo, and it's very hard to pick it up again, particularly if it wasn't ever really there in the first place. Much more interesting to start, in a sense, a new session with a new sheet of paper and a new drawing. But there are, I believe, 2 important consequences of never actually finishing our drawings, or at least not finishing a good portion of them. The first is that if we never finish our drawings, then we never get to learn the things that we only learn in the second half of the drawing or in the final quarter of the drawing. There are drawing skills, parts of the drawing process that only happen towards the end, when we need to start to pull what we've drawn already into a more cohesive whole, to look at our reference, to look at our drawing, to consider how much have I achieved, where do I need to tweak it, where do I need to add more, to have that sense of what are the final adjustments I need to make. If I think there's always some chance I'll come back to this in the future, even if I never do, that doesn't stop me from thinking I might, then I'm more likely just to leave it for when I come back to it. It's like if we take up knitting, but we end up giving up halfway through every jumper. We're never going to learn how to cast off for the neck because we never get to that point. And in the end, it's not very satisfying, I imagine, having lots of half-knitted jumpers lying around. And it's not very satisfying for an artist having a lot of half-finished drawings lying around. There's a lot of enjoyment as well as drawing skills that we miss out on if we don't actually finish our drawings. The other problem if we never finish our drawings is that we never get to critique them. We never get to look at them and to say, how did I go? Have I achieved what I was setting out to do? Have I failed in some areas? How could I improve the next drawing? How can I get a focus for my next drawing to bring into being more what I'm imagining before I put pen to paper? All the positive things that come from constructive self-critiquing, we never get to do, we never get to learn if we don't have a finished work to critique. We can always assume that it was going to turn out looking all right. It means we end up starting drawings with possibly a better developed set of skills for starting drawings, but we've fallen way behind in developing possibly almost any skills at all in finishing them, and certainly in getting that focus for next time. So having a time limit in our head, whatever it is a really important part of putting me in control of my drawing process. Think of it as a metronome ticking away in the background while we draw, reminding us that we need to keep pushing on. We need to make the decisions we need to make. We need to draw the lines we need to draw. And it puts pressure on me at times, depending on that time limit I've set myself, to not be precious, to take risks, to give it a go, I'll put the line on and I'll look at it later and work out whether it was a good one, and I'll use that in my next drawing. But it's not about making ourselves be rushed. Whatever time limit we give ourselves, it should be one, except perhaps for the odd challenge, that we have a chance of doing something that we can be pleased about in that time frame. And I would recommend we don't set time limits that are too short unless we're pretty confident that we've developed some really nice rapid gestural drawing techniques that we can use. But a 30-minute time limit can feel very quick and go very quickly when we're drawing. And we can set ourselves a 6-hour or an 8-hour or a 2-session time frame for a drawing. And then we know from the start that we're planning on precision, on careful lines, on plotting things accurately and taking care and including a lot of detail. And so we set a slow, methodical and careful tempo from the first line. Remember, I'm not saying we should be drawing quickly. I'm saying we should decide how long we're going to spend on a drawing and, being reasonable, work at staying within that period, within that time frame, because we learn so much about drawing, the drawing process, and the options that are available to us to draw in different ways when we do. All of these things, all of these opportunities are lost if when we sit down, we just start meandering on the paper thinking, well, it will take as long as it takes. And I have to say, creating videos for YouTube has certainly convinced me of the helpfulness of this, because I've had to plan my drawings much more than I have in the past and be much more conscious of time when I'm drawing. And it's been a tremendous help and a tremendous advantage, and I really do feel much more in control of my drawings and that I'm producing more stylistically cohesive drawings because of this, regardless of whether they're 5-minute drawings or 60-minute drawings. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Look, I hope if you've persevered till this point, you've found it helpful, because I think it is a really important but very neglected part of the drawing process. And I'm not talking about rushing. Rushing has the sense of losing control. It's about always being in control, but making choices within that result in consistency in our drawing. But hey, whatever you're drawing, however you're drawing it, and whatever time frame you draw it in, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.